Dear colleagues, good day. Today is the last day of our SBSTTA-24 virtual session, and we have an ambitious agenda for the day. I intend to pick up CRP 8 on synthetic biology, where we left off yesterday at paragraph 4 of section B. Next, we will consider CRP 9 on risk assessment with the intention of completing our consideration of these two CRPs by the break time at about 8:30 a.m. Montreal time. When we return from the break, we will consider the draft report of the meeting. So please look at document L1, which is available online in all languages. Under this item, we will hear the report from the co-chairs of the contact group on item 6, Marine and Coastal Biodiversity, followed by the report of the facilitator of the Friends of the Chair group on item 10, Invasive alien species. We will then hear the closing remarks of the Executive Secretary, my conclusion, including next steps, and suspend the meeting. Before we begin this ambitious agenda, I would like to update you on the process for taking forward agenda item 9 on biodiversity and health. Following yesterday's first reading, the Bureau decided to establish a contact group for this agenda item. This contact group will meet at the face-to-face meeting of SBSTTA-24. It will be co-chaired by my esteemed colleagues and Bureau members, Helena Jeffrey Brown from Antigua and Barbuda, and Marina von Weissenberg from Finland. Based on interventions and submissions received, the Secretariat will issue a non-paper document which will serve as a basis for discussion in the contact group. It is important that all interventions from yesterday are supported by a written statement, and I take this opportunity to kindly remind you to upload this, if not already done. As the Secretary has informed me that few parties that made statements at the plenary session did not provide the written submissions. The specific mandate of the contact group is to review the annex of the document, which I remind you, it's a global action plan for biodiversity and health, and if time allows, to consider reviewing the recommendations section. The modalities for the contact group meeting will be further discussed by the Bureau and communicate in due time and through the appropriate channels. Dear colleagues, we will turn our attention now to CRP 8 on synthetic biology yesterday. We began to consider this document paragraph by paragraph and had reached paragraph 4 of section B. I would like also to let you know that if you remember yesterday, Argentina had communication problems. So they informed us that after looking progress in this document, they wish to keep the fourth paragraph on the preambular section, the one that starts recalling paragraph 9 to 11 of decision 1419, to keep it also in brackets. Remember, it was a package of 6 paragraphs where one making reference to digital sequence information is in brackets. The following one also is in brackets for you to keep it in your records. Now, I would like to go to this document paragraph by paragraph, beginning where we left in paragraph 4. So I open the floor for comments in paragraph 4. I hope we can find a solution on this paragraph. So I see Belgium followed by Argentina. Belgium, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving us the floor for what we think is a general statement. Belgium welcomes the significant progress that has been made during the 2 past sessions of plenary of the Substa. Now, however, we note at the onset of this 3rd and last session of Substa plenary that not only do we still have a significant number of agenda items to deal with, but also that the outcome of our previous discussions has not as yet delivered progress to a stage for these agenda items to be negotiated at the COP. This shows in the CRP documents that are submitted for adoption today, which contain a relatively large proportion of incompletely resolved text in square brackets. Some of these also contain text that is controversial. Others contain text that has not been fully discussed. This clearly demonstrates the need for further discussion within the Substa, whenever that will be possible, or at the least to keep the options on the table to be considered by the COP. Taking into consideration that a physical meeting of Substa prior to COP is foreseen, we fortunately will have an opportunity to deal with these outstanding issues. We therefore question whether it is appropriate to push for approving CRP documents containing a substantial amount of undeveloped or unresolved issues. We feel that narrowing down our options rather than reflecting these in the outcome, whatever the nature of this outcome as an L document or a second version CRP, endangers the substantial progress that has been made. It could significantly set the discussions back at the next consideration of these issues and potentially create an undesirable precedent for preparing L documents in future meetings of the Convention. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Belgium, for your general considerations. You are right. We're trying to follow our procedures as established. I fully understand the difficulty to make progress, but I'm in your hands. You are the ones providing the many options in the documents or to helping to go forward. Let's do our best to make progress. I hope in the next session, when we have the face-to-face scheme, we can make progress as much as we want, as we can. Usually, after first reading, the natural step is to produce different options, and then we move into an L version to move on. Certainly, it's an intent to have more progress and clear text to move on and to reach consensus. But let's keep doing our best. Thank you so much. Now I give the floor to Argentina, followed by the EU, on paragraph 4.
Señor Presidente, y buen día.
Thank you. Good day. My intervention is similar to what Belgium has said, namely it's a general consideration. We'd like to call attention to the way in which we're proceeding in this final session of the plenary. As delegates may recall, and as the chair recalled yesterday, Argentina was not able to fully participate in the session. Even if internet works well in our country, the platform was not accessible in a stable way for any of our 5 delegates in Argentina involved in questions of health, agriculture, and synthetic biology. And our possibility of contributing yesterday was limited to just have a transmission by YouTube and sending in comments electronically, as has been pointed out, thank you, at the beginning of this session. And we've had even worse situations in the past. We know that certain delegations have never managed to connect because of connectivity. To imagine how frustrating it is for a country to have prepared for these meetings, and when they want to participate, they're unable to do this for technical reasons. And even worse than this, decisions continue quickly, lifting square brackets to try and reflect a consensus which we believe is artificial and does not exist on certain points. And I wonder what would happen if the mic of a delegate did not work in an in-person meeting. Would we continue, or would we try and listen to the delegate one way or another? So, dear delegates and Chair, multilateralism has shown us that all we do not want the CBD to move forward without taking account of these principles. Argentina would request in a constructive way that in this final session we should tread carefully. There's still a great deal of negotiating work to be done in person if we want to have a COP that gives results on all of the agenda items. And as has been said by Belgium, let's not try to hurry ahead too quickly. All of these documents have to be reviewed when all of the countries are able to participate in an equal and transparent way. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Argentina. And now I give the floor to the European Union, followed by Switzerland. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, and good morning and good afternoon, good evening to all colleagues. Actually, I raised my hand for paragraph 4, but I don't know if the Chair wants to further discuss the previous statements by Belgium and Argentina, acknowledging all the difficulties that we are all experiencing. Should I go on with paragraph 4, or we should remain in the previous discussion?
Okay, wait just for a second, trying to respond to both. I try also with the EU. I fully agree on the very unusual situation we're facing. I think altogether we're trying to do our best under these conditions to keep the momentum alive and to give our best advice to co-chairs to continue progress in preparation of post-2020. Of course, my hope is that we will continue on a face-to-face mode, as we usually do. And I like to take the maximum of this session today, as I said at the beginning, to go through pending work on SynBio and risk assessment. And since we will not be available to open CRP documents on marine or the case of invasive species, to listen to the work of chairs or co-chairs of contact groups and friends of the chair. That is my wish, and to leave in the best stage all documents to be undertaken. And of course, I will forward these concerns to my colleagues in the Substa Bureau when we resume this session to see the best way forward to address these concerns. But I'm in your hands. I'm just helping to facilitate the process and to get the best of our possibilities in current conditions. Thank you very much to all. Now I give the floor again to you on paragraph 4 to continue with our deliberations on CRP8. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to point out regarding the cycles that the document proposes, that in COP14 decision, there is an agreement for a broad and regular horizon scanning, So we believe that if we keep it only to one period, this irregularity is not addressed, which was already agreed in the previous scope. And this is why we propose to keep the initial wording for an initial period of 2 cycles of 2 intersessional periods. Thank you.
Thank you very much, EU. So your proposal, and this I would like to submit for this, even if I remember South Africa tried to help in a compromise with an initial period of 1 cycle and then to let COP to decide, or to go straight to the preference for an initial period of 2 cycles. So we're still discussing if we want 1 or 2. One point is on the expression of regular horizon scanning implications on a more continuous way. I'd like to put on the table to consider an initial period of 2 cycles at this stage. Is it acceptable to consider for an initial period of 2 cycles? Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just say that I fully support the comments made by Argentina regarding the way we should proceed forward. Regarding paragraph 4, during the contact meeting group, and other parties have expressed the concerns on the fact that after the adoption of the post-2020 GBF, we should be focusing on the implementation of the post-2020 GBF. So we need to be careful not to introduce new mechanisms that would require additional efforts and resources of the convention that could somehow shift the focus away from the implementation of the post-2020 GBF. So from our perspective, we should stick to the 1 intersessional period, especially that we have conceded to move forward, even though the new and emergent issues criteria have not been met. So we need to be extremely careful on how to move forward on the work of the Convention on Synthetic Biology. So therefore, we stick to our original position that we would rather have only 1 intersessional period for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Brazil. In order to make progress, I suggest to keep paragraph 4 as it is, leaving the 2 options of 1 or 2 cycles, and leave the paragraph as it is. Is there any objection to keep? I see none. Thank you very much. So this paragraph is approved. Now I look for comments on paragraph 5, please. On the establishment of a MITIC. I understand there were also extensive discussions in this paragraph in the contact group. I would like, however, to give us an opportunity to resolve it. I see Argentina. Tiene la palabra.
Gracias, señor presidente.
You have the floor. Thank you, Chair. As delegates can recall, in the contact group, we had extensive discussions on this to see whether it was necessary to have a multidisciplinary ATIC or SBSTA to continue with this process for broad and regular horizon scanning. And we didn't have enough time to take an exact decision to see which side we were going to come down. And so I think this needs to remain in square brackets for a further future discussion when we can then define the details. We think it should be SBSTA. We understand that other delegates believe that it's necessary to have an ad hoc technical expert group. So I think it should remain in square brackets for the moment. Thank you. Thank you very much. Argentina. So this paragraph proposes establishing a multidisciplinary ATIC. And discussions are still continuing, I've understood. And we'll see if anyone else wants to take the floor. And we could maintain the square brackets, but first of all, Switzerland and then Togo. Switzerland, please.
You hear me? Oh,
yes,
sorry. I didn't see that you put the microphone on. I had a cut in the connection. Sorry. So Switzerland would like to note that there was a sort of an acknowledgement that to observe this issue, synthetic biology, a multidisciplinary approach had to be taken. This is the first thing. The second thing is we acknowledge also already that we need broad horizon scanning. That was a decision. On these 2 points, we are on the view that it is necessary to have a multidisciplinary ad hoc technical group, because a normal technical expert group would be not that qualified to handle with this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Switzerland. I understand you support this paragraph with this particular qualifier of multidisciplinary. Thank you. I'll give the floor to Togo.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I think that I'm unable to be on the screen by video, but I would like to support Switzerland's position, because as we had said, even in the contact group, it is truly important that we support this paragraph as is. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Togo. I'll give the floor to Colombia.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, we would like to support your work and thank you for your leadership in these meetings, and also the work of the different co-chairs in the contact groups and the support of the Secretariat on a continual basis. But we do understand and we need to take note of the concerns expressed by colleagues previously about connectivity problems and difficulties to follow the negotiations and the different time zones, which have been a real issue for the good development and participation of many colleagues. Now, turning to this paragraph 5 in front of us, I think we need to continue our work on this, continue work on these issues, and we think the better option is to maintain the brackets for the moment, Chair. Thank you very much, Colombia.
Y he escuchado a distintas partes.
So we've listened to different parties, and my suggestion is that we should approve this paragraph with the brackets, with the square brackets. Are there any objections to adopting paragraph 5 in square brackets? No, I cannot see any objections. So paragraph 5 has therefore been adopted.
That starts with the sides. I would like to take out the brackets. To remove the brackets, please request the floor if you can offer a way forward. Brasil tiene la palabra.
Have the floor, Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, once again. And I guess paragraph 6 is pretty much related to paragraphs 4 and 5. And since we're not able to remove the brackets in paragraphs 4 and 5, we should not remove paragraph 6. And also there's another question, because I think that during the discussions on the terms of reference on the ad hoc multidisciplinary, we are not sure that this ATAG should identify new priorities. I think there was a lot of divergency on this topic. So from our perspective, we should keep all the brackets in paragraph 6. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Obrigado, Brasil. Argentina tiene la palabra.
Thank you, Brazil. And now Argentina, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. The reasoning put forward by Brazil on this paragraph is exact and precise. If we cannot agree on having a multidisciplinary tag, and if we haven't agreed on the periods, whether it's going to be for one cycle or not, for the broad and horizon scanning, then it's impossible to lift the square brackets in paragraph 6. Thank you, Argentina. So in consideration of this situation, I would suggest that paragraph 6 should be adopted with the square brackets as it now stands.
6 is approved. Now, paragraph 7, comments on paragraph, that paragraph 7 and 8 were not discussed during the contact group, but are clean, pretty simple. I hope we can accept them. Can we accept paragraphs 7 and 8? I see Canada.
Thank you, Chair. Canada has concerns about paragraph 8, and in particular about the reference to the Biosafety Clearinghouse. And our reasons for that is that the Biosafety Clearinghouse is set up by the Cartagena Protocol to facilitate exchange of information on living modified organisms. And we feel that information exchange through this clearinghouse should be limited to LMOs. Otherwise, this could set a precedent for notifying all products of SynBio, including things that are not necessarily LMOs and can be indistinguishable from products of conventional breeding. I do take the point that it is relevant in some cases, and so I do have a little bit of alternative text to propose. I would suggest including through the Biosafety Clearinghouse for products of synthetic biology that are considered to be LMOs, and capacity building on synthetic biology, taking into account, and so on.
So can you repeat your inclusions is after the word especially, I guess?
Yeah, so rather than especially, after knowledge sharing, including through the Biosafety Clearinghouse for products of synthetic biology that are considered to be living modified organisms, and capacity building on synthetic biology, taking into account, and so on. So, of course, capacity building is still needed for synthetic biology. We don't want to change that, but we'd like to make the point that the Biosafety Clearinghouse is appropriate for products of synthetic biology that are LMOs.
Okay.
Thanks.
So the paragraph with the amendments of Canada will read, calls upon parties and other stakeholders to facilitate broad international cooperation, technology transfer, knowledge sharing, including through Biosafety Clearinghouse of products of synthetic biology that are considered to be LMOs, and capacity building on synthetic biology, taking into account the needs of parties and of indigenous peoples and local communities, right? So this is to specify that Biosafety Clearinghouse is only for LMOs. And yeah, thank you very much, Canada. Now I'll give the floor to Kenya, followed by Australia.
Thank you very much, Chair. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Kenya would like to support the position taken by Canada because the Biosafety Clearinghouse is very specific on LMOs. So instead of taking all products of synthetic biology to be reported onto the BCH would be confusing. So let's limit it only to LMOs that may be derived from synthetic biology. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenya. Asante sana for supporting Canada's position. Now I'll give the floor to Australia.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll be brief. We just wanted to also lend our support to Canada, as supported by Kenya, for the insertion of that specificity that for products of synthetic biology that are considered to be living modified organisms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I submit again for adoption paragraphs 7 and 8. I see no comments, so paragraphs 7 and 8 are approved as amended. Now I open the floor for comments on paragraph 9, and it's subparagraphs that were agreed during the contact group. All subparagraphs are clean except D and F, which contain brackets. I would like to try to resolve the brackets, so I open the floor for comments on paragraph 9. I see no request from the floor. UK, followed by Indonesia.
Thank you, Chair. So I take it you're looking at all the subparagraphs under paragraph 9 at once and seeking to remove the brackets. I think, Chair, we couldn't agree to that. I think in paragraph D, which refers to the 16th and 17th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, relates back to the issues we discussed under paragraph 4 and as to whether a process runs for 1 COP period or 2 COP periods. I think from perspective, we'd be happy just leaving the 17th meeting and 17th in brackets because we're happy for a process to run to the 16th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. But there is some language at the end of paragraph 9F in brackets referring to and with a human rights approach that we would want to retain the brackets on there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UK. Seems we still retaining brackets in paragraphs D and F. Indonesia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I would like to comment on the paragraph 9F. As for our understanding, the role and effective participation of the IPLC is already represented in the decisions 10 of 40. So it's necessary to a human rights approach. So we would like to delete the last word with the bracket.
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to Ecuador. Ecuador tiene la palabra.
Ecuador, you have the floor. We cannot hear Ecuador.
We can try with Togo, followed by Mexico. Togo, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to go back to D, 9D. Indeed, we understand that there's a link with paragraph 4. If we did not agree as to 1 or 2 cycles, 2 periods, then it is logical that this cannot be resolved. So to be logical, I think we should in fact speak only of the 17th meeting. Because no matter what the circumstances are, the results have to be reviewed, as always. And before the 17th meeting. So in the meantime, if everyone is in agreement, we should retain 1 session, 1 intersessional period. And here we should then rather the 16th, keep the 16th meeting. For F, in my opinion, I am a legal expert, and I have thought greatly about this, and I wonder why this phrase is here with a human rights approach. We are talking about full participation, and to put a tail on the end of this phrase, it seems inconsistent. It could create confusion. I think that we can simply, we would be demanding participation and therefore we would be undermining rights. That is the position of Togo. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Togo. I hear already a number of comments on subparagraph F, supporting deletion with a human rights approach in the understanding that is implicit in decision 1040. So there is no need for a redundancy on this point. And it seems to me that there's still differences in paragraph D about since it's linked to paragraph 4. I'll give the floor to Ecuador again. I hope we can hear you, followed by Mexico, and then take a decision on this paragraph. Ecuador tiene la palabra.
Ecuador, you have the floor. Good day, Chair, and thank you for giving me the floor. And hello to all of the delegates that are in the meeting. I agree with the concerns that have been expressed by Argentina on this question of connectivity. Turning now to paragraph 9, we would like to suggest that we should put brackets around C, given the fact that this is directly linked to what we discussed under paragraph 5 about establishing a multidisciplinary ATIC. So that's our suggestion, and to delete the reference to paragraph F. Thank you, Ecuador. Now I'll give the floor to Mexico. Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me well? Yes, please go ahead. Thank you. We would just like to indicate that on paragraph 9 and on D and F, given the amplitude of the discussions, limiting the meetings to just one, I think, could be harmful, and this could limit progress on this. And we support that it should be reviewed under 2 cycles, as we've just discussed. So we'd like to indicate that we think that we cannot limit ourselves to just one meeting. And then coming on to F, this was a text that was proposed by us. We'd just like to make a comment and clarify this suggested addition. We consider the way to ensure full and effective participation should be by applying this human rights-based approach, so that together with the right to participation, we fully recognise all the other rights of Indigenous peoples and local communities. And we'd like to recall that it's already been recognised that it's very important to take account of IPLCs to attain the objectives of the Convention, as highlighted in the recommendations made by the Focal Point on Climate Change and Environment of the Office of the High Commissioner of the United Nations during the informal sessions of Substand SBI. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Mexico. So on your final comment, and from what I've understood as well from the expert, the legal expert from Togo, I believe, no one is against the fact there being a human rights-based approach, but rather that this is already implicit together with other elements that are mentioned in previous COP decisions. And they include this whole range of elements already. So I've listened to various parties requesting the elimination or deletion of this because they've said it's redundant. So I'd like to ask Mexico if you want to maintain this text, nevertheless, amongst square brackets, or do you have some flexibility to delete this to have a clean text on the understanding that this concept is already included? Mexico, please. So I'm giving the floor to Mexico, please. Thank you, Chair. Well, if you allow me, I'm going to briefly consult with the delegation and then I'll get back to you with our response in a moment. Thank you very much, Mexico, for that, of course.
Microphone to Germany, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Concerning paragraph 9D, we would better keep the brackets around prior to the 16th and the 17th meeting, and cannot accept the proposal by UK. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Argentina, last intervention on this.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. This paragraph has got lots of different elements, as have been pointed out by other delegates, related to the ad hoc or what's going to happen by in Substa. And there's lots of different questions hanging over this paragraph, which means much of it needs to remain under square brackets. For example, under A, where it says the work of the multidisciplinary ATEG, as well as, that needs to be put in square brackets. And then under B, the final reference to the multidisciplinary ad hoc technical expert group should also be put in square brackets. And we should also add in square brackets Substa there. And then C, all of that should be put in square brackets until we decide whether yes or no there's going to be a multidisciplinary ATEG. And those are the main points. We don't have any other comments. We support Germany, namely that we need to keep square brackets around the two options mentioned under D. And then we agree with what has been expressed by the other delegates on the remaining subparagraphs. Thank you very much, Argentina. So I would therefore suggest that for paragraph 9, let's start with subparagraph A, where there would be square brackets in the part that's just been mentioned by Argentina, namely where it refers to the work of the multidisciplinary ad hoc technical expert group. That would be in square brackets. Then under B, the last part, that once again refers to the multidisciplinary ATEG, that would also be in square brackets. Then under C, as was also suggested by Ecuador, that would all be in square brackets. And then we would also maintain the square brackets in paragraph D. Then E, that remains clean text. Then on F, taking account of what Mexico said, well, I'm going to give the floor back to Mexico because they've asked for the floor now. Mexico, please go ahead. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Well, in order to be flexible and to be able to move ahead with this discussion, which we understand is quite a complicated one, we agree that we can delete our proposal for F. Thank you very much, Mexico, for your flexibility on the clear understanding that we are not at all eliminating references to human rights, but rather these are already implicitly included in previous COP decisions, as we've said. So, having said that, I would propose then the adoption of this paragraph 9 and all of its subparagraphs, and with the appropriate square brackets on A, B, C, D, and F would now be clean. Are there any objections to adopting this paragraph with those amendments? I see Switzerland and then Togo. Oh, sorry. Sweden.
I asked for the floor some time ago, and we were thinking about this para 9F with a suggestion by Mexico. I am sorry, but we think still that it might be good to keep it in brackets for now, since this is something that we think it is something that is a discussion also related to the coming meetings and open working group. So for now, we would like to keep it in bracket.
Thank you, Sweden. So we keep Mexico's language back as among the many options. Togo, you have the floor. No lo escucha. We cannot hear you well.
Okay. Merci, Président.
Thank you, Chair. I was having a connection problem. So I didn't take the mic as a result. I think that I'm not sure I followed completely paragraph 5 was supported, I believe, by 4 countries that had already expressed their opinions. They were not objecting to keeping 5 as is and remove the square brackets, but I wasn't able to follow that. So if people are asking to keep brackets around the ATEG, that the countries were talking about the relevance of having this MATEG, a multidisciplinary ATEG, to do this work. So I don't see why they have to be in square brackets at this point, unless there are countries that have objections. I thought that we had done a lot of work on this point. So that's my opinion. I thank Mexico for their understanding of F, and I think that that is the principle that we should work with, the implicitness of.
Thank you, Togo. My recollection is that paragraph 5 is in brackets. That's why connections with those paragraphs in relation to the multidisciplinary ATEG are in brackets as well. That's why. Once again, I submit adoption of paragraph 9 with brackets also paragraphs A, B, C, D, F, including human rights approach. I see no objections, then paragraph 9 is approved. Now, let's move to paragraph 10, which was not discussed during the contact group. Can we accept it as it is? Paragraph 10. Brazil.
Here, Mr. Chair, once again, and be consistent with our previous comments and also in line with the positions of Argentina and the UK. Regarding paragraph 10, we understand we should keep in brackets the reference to the multidisciplinary ad hoc technical expert group, and also the reference to 16th and 17th meetings of the parties. And of course, we move brackets as well the meetings of the Cartagena and Nagoya Protocol to be consistent. But as we still have not reached an agreement on the extension of the horizon scanning process, we understand that it would be premature to include a reference to further meetings of the parties beyond the 16th meeting.
So, Brazil, you are suggesting the inclusion of 4 brackets in this paragraph?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
starting.
We'd put in brackets the reference to the M tag in the second, third line.
Yeah, the reference, well, I don't know if it's from the second line because it's containing the report of the multidisciplinary expert group. So probably it begins at the end of second line.
Yeah.
That's the first one. The second is 16 and 17 meetings.
Yeah.
The third one is at the end, 11 and 12 meetings. And then the fourth one and the 5th and 6th meetings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Brazil. Now give the floor to the UK.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. We were going to make similar comments because, again, this links to how many cycles we agree to in future. We're not opposed to an RTEG, and we would support running for 1 COP cycle to begin with, and then it can be reviewed. So we suggest putting brackets round the reference to the second COP in the 3 cases here. So we would put and 17th in brackets, the words and 12th in brackets referring to the Cartagena Protocol, and 6th in brackets referring to the meetings of the Nagoya Protocol. And to save intervening again on paragraph 11, exactly the same points apply there, Chair. I think we would put the words "and 17th" in brackets there as well for consistency. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have brackets inside the brackets, as proposed by Brazil and the UK. I see we will not have a consensus on this. So my question is, we had a previous decision to set up a horizon scanning process. We're still not defining through which type of attack and for how long time to do it. I hope in the future we can make progress. So I submit for approval paragraph 10 with these 4 sets of brackets, with brackets inside as proposed by Brazil and the UK. I see no objections, so paragraph 10 is approved. Also, I submit for consideration for approval paragraph 11, which already have brackets among the 16 and 17 meetings of the COP. Is there any objection? Togo, you have the floor.
Chair, thank you. On paragraph 11, I see a very relevant idea that could help us to take a proper position here. As I'd already explained, I think it was regarding paragraph 4. The question of intersessional periods is relevant here too. The substa is to review the results of the work and then decide on a proposal regarding extending the process. So the idea being whether or not to continue the process. So at the end of the paragraph, we see, and to make a recommendation on the need to extend that process. And so it is not helpful to say prior to the 16th and the 17th meetings, because they will look at it at the 16th and then develop a position on whether or not to extend the process. So once again, it's one intercession period that should be adopted. So I just wanted to draw the attention of the other parties so that you can understand why we want to have one intercession period. Because it needs to be reviewed at that point and the decision made as to whether to extend it or not. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Togo. That's why there are brackets among 16 and 17 meetings. Still discussion if it's one intersessional or 2 intersessional periods. I said before, I'm in your hands. I see no agreement. So let's retain brackets on both 16 and 17 meetings. Quickly, I'm worried about the time, so I give the floor to Argentina, followed by Mexico.
Gracias, señor presidente. Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. We're not very sure about the last phrase, to make a recommendation on the need to extend that process. Probably we have to work on this a bit more. I would suggest that we should put this part on the need to extend that process in square brackets so that we can come up with a wording that will show that this recommendation will cover the possibility of extending or not the process, or whatever we decide that we want to do to finish off the process. Okay, thank you. And now Mexico, you have the floor. Please go ahead, Mexico. Thank you, Chair. Just, the speaker is breaking up a great deal. We wonder whether in this paragraph 1, perhaps we should refer actually to paragraph 4 instead of paragraph 1. That's in the third line, points out the interpreter. Sorry, I couldn't quite hear you, Mexico. Could you please repeat? Can you hear me now? Yes, please go ahead. So on the third line, where it refers to paragraph 1 above, we think it would be correct to say paragraph 4, which is where we actually establish this horizon scanning process. Okay, I think you're right, actually. Secretariat, can you check that out, please? Anything else, Mexico, to add? No, we just wanted to say that we think it's very important, and we weren't able to say this before, but we think it's very important to be able to establish this multidisciplinary ATEG so that we can continue with the assessment of all of the different aspects related to synthetic biology, just to keep it brief. Thank you very much, Mexico, and the Secretariat has confirmed that you were right, Mexico. Thank you for pointing that out. It should be a reference to paragraph 4. So now I would like to put paragraph 11 for your adoption with those amendments. Are there any objections to adopting this? I see Germany, please. Yes, no? Yes, Germany, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if you keep the brackets on the part need to extend the process, because we will support brackets. Thank you. Okay, sorry.
Yes, it is. So this paragraph is making reference to paragraph 4, also bracket 16, 17, and also brackets on the need to extend that process. I see no objections, then paragraph 11 is adopted. Now I put forward for adoption paragraph 12. Was not discussed during the contact group. Can we accept as it is paragraph 12? I see no objections, then paragraph 12 is adopted. Then we move to the annex. I am aware that the contact group worked hard to come to an agreement on part A of the annex, which describes the process for horizon scanning. Paragraph 1. Then is approved. Now, this paragraph is into a table which was not discussed during the contact group. Can we accept it as it is? Argentina?
El problema
with the is that the table is open. We've not been able to finish off discussions on this, so I think it's good to keep it. Reference will be recorded.
And the two brackets. I see no paragraph is adopted, is approved. Now we move to paragraph 3. The text is clean except for the inclusion at the end of the sentence in square brackets. I would like to solve it if possible. If you have a way forward, I yield the floor. It's only the brackets on including social, economic, and cultural impacts, as well as related ethical issues. Any suggestion? South Africa.
Thank you, Chair. South Africa recognizes that socioeconomic and ethical issues, cultural and issues, are covered under Article 26 of the Cartagena Protocol, and we would suggest deletion of the added text there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. South Africa. So it's been suggested to delete text in brackets. Can we delete the text in brackets? Is anybody opposing to deletion of the last part of paragraph 3? I'd like to see if there is any objection. I see Togo followed by Mexico. Togo, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I support South Africa's position completely. So we propose also removing that part. Thank you.
Kiko.
I'll give the floor to Mexico, please. Thank you. And sorry for intervening briefly. On this paragraph, we do not agree to elimination of the square brackets. The sound is very bad, points out the interpreter. As we said in the contact group, there was quite a bit of support from various participants and observers who thought that it was important to specify this inclusion of these social, economic and cultural and ethical impacts, given that synthetic biology has lots of implications that are not just limited to the Cartagena Protocol. And we think that reference to Article 26 does not cover totally all of this need to take account of all of these different socio-economic impacts. The sound was extremely difficult to catch their points at the interpreter. So we're submitting that we should adopt paragraph 3, including the text in square brackets at the end of the paragraph. Any objections to approving the text? We've heard opinions in favour and against. There's no agreement. So let's adopt paragraph 3, including the text in square brackets at the end. Is there any objection to that from any parties asking for the floor? They're all disappearing from my screen. Any opposition to approving this paragraph with the square brackets? Sweden, please.
Sweden, you have the floor.
Yeah, we are not in opposition to. I just want to clarify that Sweden was of the opinion that the broad horizon scanning process already have the mandate to, since they are going to look at the potential positive and negative impacts of the objective of the convention, and this already include social, economic, and cultural impacts. But if it is unclear, we think that it might be needed to be pointed out. However, we do think that the related ethical issues much better could be covered in another more suitable process for those questions. So our suggestion was to put that last part as well as related critical issues in brackets.
Yes, Sweden, I was asking if you approve the paragraph with the brackets.
Yeah.
So it's not an opposition to approve it with brackets.
No, it's not.
Okay, thank you. Then I give the floor to Malawi and Colombia. Is there any opposition to approve the paragraph with brackets? If you are supporting to keep the brackets, it's fine. Just like to know if you are opposing to approve the paragraph 3 with the text in brackets at the end. So I see Malawi followed by Colombia. I'm wondering, why are you opposing? Malawi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if I understood you very well, but I wanted to support South Africa and those who are proposing the deletion of the text in the brackets, because when you consider
to keep the brackets, right?
Yes, should keep the brackets if people are not agreeing on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Malawi. Colombia. Tiene la palabra.
You have the floor. I'm putting for consideration paragraph 3 as it stands with square brackets at the end. So you've withdrawn your request for the floor, so paragraph 3 is approved.
Paragraph 4, the effectiveness of the process. paragraph 4 has 2 brackets. I think if, in order to avoid the discussions on the regularity, if it's every 2 years or so on, I propose to adopt the paragraph as it is with brackets. Is there any opposition to adopt paragraph 4 with brackets? Are you opposing? I see Sweden, followed by Togo. I don't believe we're going to resolve it. It's the same discussion on regularity and every 2 years. Sweden?
I just wanted to say that it's going a little bit too fast. So we are not, well, the participants are not, have not had the possibility to speak. That was just what I would like to say. Thank you. But I'm not opposing.
Thank you, Sweden. Yeah, I'm worried about the time, and I see we're keeping all options open so far. Togo, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I support you. Absolutely. I know this is not an easy job. You are trying to move rapidly because time is working against us. However, the states do need to have the opportunity to speak. For me, it is true. We didn't have the time, as was said by our country in the beginning, to participate fully in the effectiveness of the process and the debates around it. So it would be good to return to this issue. Regarding paragraph 4, even the very notion of elaborating provisions, I think we have to be as clear as possible. When you say regularly, it is not a clear expression of what we want. When we are clear and we say every 2 years, here we understand that the parties are asking for this. When it says regularly, it seems that it isn't clear. And so this is Togo's position. I would like to remove the square brackets from every 2 years. This is my opinion. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Togo. So Togo proposed to delete brackets around every 2 years, if I understood well. Germany, followed by Malawi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, but to be consistent, there's even missing the part every 4 years. So we could go with regularly, but really not with every 2 years. But if it is still there every 2 years, then there needs also be a bracket around a new text on every 4 years, because this is consistent with what we had before, like on the 7th meeting and so on.
Thank you very much. I see we will not reach an agreement unless you can accept that maybe we use shall be reviewed regularly without making any comment yet on every 2 years or every 4 years, in understanding that the previous decision of the COP is to establish a regular process for horizon scanning. Is that acceptable? My proposal to only say it shall be reviewed regularly without making any specification. I will try once. If there is opposition to my proposal, then we're going to keep the paragraph 4 with brackets around regularly, around every 2 years, and around every 4 years. Do you believe just to say regularly is acceptable? I'd like to see if there is any opposition to my proposal in order to help to move this forward. I see disappearing request from the floor. There is only Togo. Are you opposing to my proposal, Togo? You have the floor.
Monsieur le Président.
Chair, I'm sorry. But if we keep and accept your proposal, and we think that it's COP that decides on the periodicity, then this also should be modified to say shall be reviewed regularly, subject to decision by COP. No, the thing is that the subject to regarded every 2 years or every 4 years. So we were trying to be more precise with the time frame, but COP can decide differently, you understand. So if we keep the word regularly, then it will no longer be subject to, we will do it regularly in accordance with the decision of the conference of the parties. I'm not sure if I was able to make myself understood.
So, Togo, I understand that you're suggesting that the paragraph could read, the effectiveness of the process shall be reviewed regularly in accordance with the conference, with decisions by the conference of the parties.
Exactly. That's what I was saying.
So I hope it is acceptable to approve this paragraph saying the effectiveness of the process shall be reviewed regularly in accordance with decision by the conference of the parties. Is there any opposition to approve this paragraph as amended? I see no. So paragraph 4 is approved. Thank you very much. Now we move to section B on terms of reference for the multidisciplinary ATEC. I understand we have two options, right? So one is brackets as a whole, and well, I open the comments on paragraph 1, where we have these options on the establishment of the multidisciplinary ATEC. Hacia Argentina, tiene la palabra.
Presidente, y disculpes en relación al párrafo 4.
Sorry, it was on paragraph 4. To come back to what Togo has said, in accordance with the decision by the Conference of Parties, we'd like to maintain brackets around the word regularly, given the fact that I think it's been very clear from the decision that we haven't defined the periodicity of this. So regularly here seems to preempt and predefine things. So we'd like it to be in brackets for the moment. Thank you. And then on B, as we asked in the contact group, we haven't yet defined fully if we're going to have a multidisciplinary ATEC. There's still discussions on each of the different aspects. In this context, in this plenary, I think it's going to be complicated. So we would suggest that we should keep all of part B in square brackets. I'm afraid once again the speaker was cutting out a lot there. Thank you, Argentina. So paragraph 4, that's just been adopted. Now you're asking us to reopen it and to include square brackets around the term regularly. And then you're suggesting also that all of the section B, the terms of reference, should be in square brackets, should remain in square brackets, given the fact that it's going to be very complicated to deal with the terms of reference and the table. It'll be hard to resolve all of that in the remaining minutes, and that we should leave it for the next Substa session with our face-to-face. So my proposal to save time is that we should maintain the whole of section B in square brackets as it stands in the document. Are there any objections to leaving section B in square brackets? Because there's a great deal of work that's pending, lots of options remain open, and unfortunately we're not able to move ahead on the details just now. If there's no objections, then we will proceed to approve section B with all of it in square brackets. Thank you very much. So that means that we have finished our deliberations on this document. Just a moment. I just got a bit lost there, says the chair. So we've not got many minutes left to continue now with CRP 9 on risk assessment and risk management of living modified organisms.
First, we will listen to a report back from the co-chairs of the contact group I established at the plenary on May 24, which was mandated to work on the process to develop specific risk assessment guidance materials for organisms containing engineered gene drives, as well as the need for risk assessment guidance materials for living modified fish. After hearing from the contact group, we will consider CRP on risk assessment and risk management, which was developed based on the comments received during the informal session in February, our plenary on May 24th, and of course the inputs from the meetings of the contact group. Now I invite Mr. Werner Schenkel from Germany to report on the work done by the contact group on this topic. Mr. Schenkel will be presenting the report on behalf of the co-chairs of this group. Mr. Schenkel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and a good morning, good evening, dear delegates. I had the pleasure to co-chair the contact group on risk assessment. And the group met 2 times after it was established by the Substa chair, and we had intense and very productive discussions on the issues of the mandate. Our mandate included to work on paragraphs which are now reflected as paragraphs 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, as well as the annex of the current CRP. The group worked on the basis of a non-paper prepared by the co-chairs with support from the Secretariat. During our sessions, we discussed all paragraphs of the mandate as well as the annex. The group made good progress, especially on the process to develop additional voluntary guidance materials and the implementation of the process laid out in Annex 1 of Decision CP9/13. The terms of reference for an ATEC for these tasks are far developed. However, there are still unresolved issues on paragraph 1C of the terms of reference regarding the scope of additional voluntary guidance materials on organisms containing engineered gene drives, as well as what group shall develop a first draft of additional voluntary guidance materials. I would like to highlight, Chair, that the main achievements of the group were to reach a common understanding to develop additional voluntary guidance materials on organisms containing engineered gene drives, and not to proceed at this stage with the development of additional voluntary guidance materials on living modified fish. Finally, I would like to thank my co-chair Ntakatseni Chidada for her work in addressing these tasks, and to all delegates for their cooperation and support. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Werner Schenkel and Mrs. Ntakatseni Chidada, and to the entire contact group for all your hard work. Colleagues, we have now heard from the contact group that contribute to this CRP. I remind you that to get to this point, there were intense negotiations and discussions, and therefore, when considering CRP, I propose that you refrain from making interventions that may reopen issues that have been already discussed, and approve those paragraphs as they are. I mean, they did their best. to obtain what we have in the CRP. I also think that paragraphs that were not considered by the contact group are not highly controversial, and I would like to invite you to accept them as they are. This will allow us to approve this CRP as it is. Are there any objections to approve the document as a whole, in the understanding that best efforts are there, or we want to open the document and go paragraph by paragraph? So I would like to put this consideration if there's any opposition to approve the document as it is, including the different brackets on different paragraphs. This document has not too many. It's a short document, 4 pages, but in paragraph 4, there's one set of brackets, paragraph 6, 9, 11a, and in the annex on paragraph 1, so paragraphs A, B, and D only. So that is my suggestion. I see 2 requests for the floor from Finland and Portugal. I guess you're opposing to approve the document as it is. Finland, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I am not opposing. You will soon hear what I have a request to the, and of course I am in your hands. There is one thing that we think is missing from the preamble text, and that is the reference to precautionary principle. This is what we have raised both in the informal and the formal meeting in our statement. And based on that, I have a suggestion for your consideration, or for the consideration, of course, of all of us, to add the following sentence in the preamble. And it reads as follows: reconfirming the importance of the precautionary approach, in accordance with the Cartagena Protocol. I have placed it in my work after the preamble text, the longer paragraph or the bigger paragraph, starting also recalling decision, etc., etc. I have placed it there, but I am of course in your hands.
Thank you, Finland. That can be included before nothing. The paragraph starting with nothing, the last one.
Yes, indeed.
Right. This is just a mention to precautionary approach on the Cartagena Protocol.
Yes.
Thank you, Finland. I still trying to see if with this we can approve the whole package, but I see Portugal followed by France. Portugal, help me.
And I would like to support the intervention made by the delegate from Finland related with the precautionary principle. And I would like also to use this opportunity that I have the floor to bring another issue of concern of Portugal. So, Mr. Chair, Portugal is very concerned about the way marine issues have been dealt with this SBSTTA-24 meeting. Discussions regarding marine and coastal biodiversity, including EPSAs, were not conclusive, and several matters regarding the conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity were not properly discussed. Sometimes due to time constraints, others due to the lack of a platform to address them in an integrated manner.
Portugal, is your comment on marine issues related to this document? Because we will see later in the report, we will hear reports from co-chairs dealing with marine issues. Probably your comment, if it's not related to risk assessment.
No, it's not. I was using the opportunity, but I will come back again.
Yes, please. Okay. France, followed by Switzerland. Are you posing for the adoption of the whole document with a small amendment by the inclusion from Finland with all brackets?
Bonjour à tous, merci Monsieur le Président.
Good day, everyone. Thank you, Chair. No, I'm not in opposition of adopting with Finland's suggestion. I just wanted to say that I completely support your proposal to accept the whole document. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Switzerland, I see, is Switzerland again asking for the floor? Or maybe it's a mistake. And I see only Brazil asking for the floor. Adelante, Brazil.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Yes, go ahead and thank you, Chair.
Clear, we would approve the CRP, but retaining all brackets, right?
That's right.
And okay, regarding the proposal made by Finland, we would suggest replacing reconfirming with recalling. I think this will be more standard language that already previous COP decisions and MOP decisions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Obrigado, Brazil.
Thank you very much, Brazil.
Again, to Switzerland is asking for the floor, or is a mistake?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I effectively raised my hands. Thank you very much. So I would like to support very much the insertion of Finland, as it goes in the line of our statement and the statement we made previously. And also we support your proposal to accept this text on the whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see support. I was asking for opposition, so I was very worried. Colombia tiene la palabra.
Colombia, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. We are not objecting to your proposal. We'd just like to ask something. It's a lengthy document, and there are some paragraphs that we've not adopted. Or rather, we haven't negotiated them yet, nor have we really looked at them. So given that, I think it'd be reasonable for the whole document to be put in brackets, because there's certain paragraphs that we haven't looked at, and that concerns us. We haven't been able to look at the whole document and approve it as it stands. We haven't been able to actually make any statements on certain paragraphs, and quite a lot of paragraphs. Thank you very much, Colombia. I think that the co-chairs have done a great deal of work to obtain a document with a lot of clean text that's not controversial. And I'm just suggesting that there's some square brackets that have not been able to be resolved during the sessions. To put a whole document in square brackets, that would mean that there's no conclusion. And that means that this cannot be referred on to the next phase, this document. So I'd really invite you. Otherwise, we're all going to be held up. So I'd invite you to adopt this document, to approve it as it stands. And we just stick to the square brackets that appear in paragraphs 4, 6, 9, 11A, and in the annex 1A, B, and D. They're the only parts that are in square brackets, because otherwise we really can't move ahead. I really hope that with that explanation, we will be able to approve this document with the included square bracket text, and also with the inclusion as modified by Brazil in the preambular part, where we'd be saying, recalling the importance of the precautionary approach.
As a whole piece, this document, we're running out of time. We're about the break time. I hope we can do that. I see this is the best way to proceed, but I'm in your hands. I believe Togo and Sweden are opposing. Togo, you have the floor.
Monsieur le Président, merci.
Chair, thank you for the work that's been done. I think that the issues of risk assessment are very relevant and take a good deal of time to deal with. So I think that much of work's been done and much faith has been shown to get this document together, and to put the whole document in square brackets is not something I would go for. And so I support your proposal to adopt the document as is. However, just a small thing, just to be logical, to put, as we put the X group in square brackets. So each time we invite or make reference to the expert group, it should perhaps be in square brackets. After the last paragraph of the annex, it also refers to, this is in point 2, so it refers here to the expert group, and therefore it should also be in square brackets. And as per the chair's proposal, I think that we could then approve the whole document as is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Togo. So you're proposing to include some brackets in paragraph 2 of the annex when making reference.
Exactly.
Okay, I hope
Exactly, Chair.
We will have the opportunity to do it in the next round.
Okay.
So maybe for simplicity, I hope you can wait, my dear colleague from Togo, for making these changes and to approve the piece, the whole piece. I will try, and thank you for your support.
Merci, President.
Thank you, Chair.
Your flexibility. Sweden, last intervention on this intent.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. No, we're not opposing the chair's proposal. We were just, if you really want to solve the brackets, there is the 1 and 9 that is there of mistake that we would most certainly like to clear up if possible. But if it's going to complicate things, we can wait until the next round.
Thank you for your flexibility, Sweden. So with this, I submit for adoption the whole document with the brackets, and there's one amendment to move on. I thank you very much for your flexibility. So this CRP on risk management, CRP 9, is approved. Now, let's go to the break. We will continue. We will continue with our program. Thank you so much for your support in moving on. And we will reconvene in 15 minutes. Thank you so much. Dear colleagues, welcome back. We will now review the status of remaining items and corresponding CRPs. Let's turn to agenda item 6, marine and coastal biodiversity. You will recall that I established a contact group focused on ecologically or biologically significant marine areas, which was chaired by Ms. Marie-May Musungele from Seychelles and Mr. Matthias Steitz from Germany. The contact group was mandated to focus on Annexes 6, 8, 11, and 13 of the document, SBSTTA-24, as these represent the annexes on which parties express the most divergent views during the formal and informal plenary sessions of SBSTTA-24. A non-paper was developed to support the deliberations of this contact group. Now I invite contact group co-chair, Mr. Matthias Steitz, to report back on the discussions of the contact group. So you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Together with my colleague, Marie-May Musungele from Seychelles, we had the pleasure to co-chair the contact group addressing EPSAs. This contact group met from 7 to 10:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on the 10th and 11th of May. In line with the mandate provided by the chair of SBSTTA, the contact group focused on specifically on Annexes 6, 8, 11, and 13 of document CBD/SBSTTA/24/6. The outputs of our discussion are reflected in CRP 4, together with other annexes and recommendations on this issue that the contact group did not address. Prior to the contact group, Annexes 6 and 8 of the pre-session document were combined into a new Annex 6, and Annexes 11 and 13 of the pre-session document were combined and appear now as Annex 10. This was done with a view to streamlining discussions on the basis of similarities between these annexes. So the annexes on which the contact group was mandated to focus appear as Annex 6 and Annex 10 in CRP 4. All in all, there were productive discussions in the contact group. However, there are a number of issues around which the contact group was unable to find agreement, as shown by numerous brackets in Annex 6 and 10. Once it was clear that the contact group could not make further progress in those annexes and thus had exhausted its mandate, the contact group briefly opened discussions on Annex 2. New text was introduced in that annex and on which consensus was also unable to be found, and thus bracketed text also appears in Annex 2. Many thanks to all the delegates who actively and constructively contributed to the contact group discussion, and with that I hand the floor back to the chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Steitz and Ms. Musungele. I thank you for your hard work in chairing this contact group. This report by the co-chairs will be reflected in the report of the meeting. As you may recall, following the first reading on item 6, I developed 2 CRPs on marine and coastal biodiversity, CRP 2 and CRP 4. As you have just heard, parts of CRP 4 were considered by the contact group, while CRP 2 was developed based on the statements and submissions received during the informal session in February and the plenary session in May. Very unfortunately, we have run out of time at this session to consider the CRP documents, and we have to do so at the face-to-face meeting of SBSTTA-24. Let's move to item 10 on the invasive alien species. Yes, I remember. Yeah, I'm switching between documents, but I remember that Portugal has an intervention before, and I mentioned that if it's related to this topic, you can take the floor now. Please go ahead, Portugal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity to come back to this issue again. So how I mentioned before, Portugal is very concerned about the way marine issues have been dealt with in the SBSTTA-24 meeting. Discussions regarding marine and coastal biodiversity, including EBSAs, were not conclusive, and several matters regarding the conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity were not properly discussed. Sometimes due to time constraints, others due to the lack of a platform to address them in an integrated manner. For instance, a group of friends of the chair. At this stage, it's not clear how intersessional work can be organized in a more effective way, and which issues can be addressed during this period. We are particularly concerned with CRP2 and CRP4, and we would like to know how the Chair and the Secretariat will wish to proceed their discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Portugal. As I explained, very unfortunately, we have run out of time. And hopefully, we are hopefully all together to address this. We can all and also context the chair to present reports to the plenary now, and we will continue in the face-to-face as we do. It's important to highlight that this process was also agreed by the Subsidiary Bureau, and we've been in many meetings trying to find the best way to move on. All items are important. All items are very important, but we're responding to mandate from the top in the way to move on. I would like to move to item 10, where I see two interventions. Please be as brief as possible, because we need to move on to listen also to reports from other group and to continue with the closure. You have the floor.
You're brief. I agree with the concerns expressed by Portugal representatives from the European Union, and we've got the high-level coalition and the Global Alliance, and we feel that these topics should have been taken into account in the session. And we'd also like to put on the table that there's the underrepresentation of these topics in the draft 0 GBF. And please send this message to the co-chairs about this process and take account of the new draft that's coming out within a month. Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I'm sure that the co-chairs of the OEWG for post-2020 are listening carefully to these comments and are going to take that into account for the preparation of version 1 of this draft. Senegal, you have the floor.
Merci, Président.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? Thank you. Thank you very much. I find myself with the two countries that have spoken, Portugal, and also support the position of the EU and Colombia. Biodiversity, marine and coastal biodiversity, extremely important to us. This is an issue that is so very important. And so I would like to know what will be way forward from here in order to integrate marine and coastal issues into the global framework?
Thank you very much, Senegal. As I said, I'm sure co-chairs are listening to this. As you know, in previous agenda items, they already have advising addendum 2 of document 3 and also the report of co-chairs. I'm sure they have well enough information and recognize the importance of marine biodiversity for the next version. And as I said, both documents CRP2 and CRP4 will be undertaken later when we have the opportunity to be face-to-face. With this, I would like to continue with our intention to move on, and let's move to item 10. To item 10 on invasive alien species. You will recall that after the plenary session on Wednesday, 26 May, on this item, I established a Friends of the Chair group, which was facilitated by my colleague on the Bureau, Ms. Senka Barudanovic from Bosnia and Herzegovina, and met on Tuesday, 1st of June, from 9 to 12 p.m. Montreal time. Now I invite Senka to report back to the discussions of the Friends of the Chair. Senka, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes.
Based on interventions made by parties at the informal and formal SBSTA meetings on this item, the Chair requested the Secretariat to send in invitations to delegates from 16 parties, 14 of which attended the meeting. I would like to thank all participants of the Friends of Chair group for their time, contribution, and active participation. The Friends of Chair group was tasked to find an agreement on the way forward on how to address annexes in the CRP document. These annexes received extensive comments during informal and formal sessions of SBSTA-24. The comments are reflected in CRP 7, which is suggested to be the basis for further work. Participants in the Friends of the Chair group were invited to express their general views on this issue, followed by discussion on the specific language of recommendation to the COP on the way forward. After constructive discussion, the Friends of Chair group agreed on the following paragraphs. First, to take the note of the online forum on invasive alien species and the report of ARTEG and the specific elements of the ARTEG report. It is reflected in paragraph 1 of recommendations to the COP. Second, the request to Executive Secretary to organize a peer review process on the annexes 1 to 6 in CRP 7 and to convene a moderated, open-ended online forum on the results of the peer review process. The results of these processes will be made available to SBSTA with a view to make recommendations for consideration by the 16th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. It is reflected in paragraph 2. Chair, I am once again grateful to all your friends that participated in our discussion and helped to find the way forward. The text in paragraphs 1 and 2 of CRP 7 is the result of our discussion. Chair, you will note that one paragraph that I just mentioned still has square brackets. While we could not resolve it during the Friends of the Chair meeting, I am confident that this is a good basis for continuing discussion when work on this CRP resumes at SBSTA. Lastly, I would like to thank the colleagues from the Secretariat who supported the discussion to ensure that this could happen in effective manner. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Senka, for your hard work in facilitating this Friends of the Chair group. This report by the facilitator of Friends of the Chair group will be reflected in the report of the meeting. As you have just heard, parts of CRP 7 were considered by the Friends of the Chair, who found a way forward for the annexes on this document. It is suggested that further work is to be done after COP15. Other paragraphs of the recommendation section and annexes were revised based on the statements and submissions received during the informal session in February and the plenary session in May. Again, very unfortunately, we have run out of time at this session to consider the CRP, and we will have to do so after face-to-face meeting of SBSTTA-24. So we still a lot of work to be done when we have the opportunity to be at the face-to-face meeting. Now, distinguished delegates, we now come to the closing session of this first part of the meeting. As noted in the chair's scenario note that constitute the organization of the work of this meeting, we have now come to our final session before suspending the 24 meeting of SBSTTA. We will now review the draft report of this part of the 24 meeting of SBSTTA. Then I would like to draw your attention to document CBD SBSTTA-24 Part 1, L1, which is the draft report of this part of the meeting. The document was made available earlier, and I hope that all of you had a chance to read it. Now I invite the rapporteur, Ms. Senka Barodanovic again, from Bosnia and Herzegovina, to introduce the document. Senka, you have the floor again.
Thank you, Chair, again. Distinguished delegates, I am pleased to introduce the draft report on the proceedings of the first part of 24th meeting of the subsidiary body on scientific, technical and technological advice, which has been circulated as document CBD SBSTTA-24 Part 1, L1. As is customary with meetings under the Convention, the report is largely procedural. It reflects the statements made at opening session. It highlights the actions taken or agreed to on organizational matters, including on establishment and operations of contact groups and friends of chair groups. It contains the list of parties and observers that made interventions during the plenary sessions under each relevant agenda item. I commend this report to you for approval. In light of the agreement reached to suspend the meeting, the full report of SBSTTA-24, which is going to include the report of the second part of the meeting, will be adopted at a resumed session at a later date. The record of today's proceedings will also be incorporated into the report before it goes through the normal process of editing and posting. I thank everyone, including the Secretariat, who assisted and contributed to the preparation of this report. With that, I am pleased to submit to you the report of the first part of 24th meeting of the SBSTTA for your approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you again, Senka, in your role as rapporteur of the meeting. Dear colleagues, owing to the suspension of the meeting, the last three items of the agenda, namely items 11 other matters, 12 adoption of the report, and 13 closure of the meeting, are deferred to a resumed session of the meeting that will be held at a later date. I will bring the proceedings of this meeting, the outcomes of the contact groups on agenda item 3, CRPs and L documents and statements made during the course of the meeting, all of which are available on the meeting website, to the attention of the co-chairs of the working group on post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. I propose that we review the report section by section. So, is there a comment on section 1, Item 1. I open the floor for precisions. On item 1, I see no request from the floor, so item 1 is approved. Let's move to item 2 on organizational matters. I open the floor. Sweden, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would like to thank the Rapporteur and the Secretariat for this report. And we are wondering if under item 2, it should be mentioned that the Rapporteur said in the beginning of the meeting that all intersessional work will be covered in this report. We cannot see any reference to intersessional work in this document, and we are wondering how and where it will be addressed. For us, it's quite important that this report includes the requests for intersessional work, especially until open-ended working group 3, and we made requests, for example, on item 9, health. We cannot see that item 9 is covered in part 1 of the report, and we have therefore the question when and how intersessional work will be covered in this document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sweden. I'll ask Secretariat to see if there's any reaction to this point when we talk about organizational matters. I don't know if this is exactly the section where Sweden address can be taken. Secretariat?
So that's probably not in organizational matters, also intersessional work. To be clear, what does it cover? We are not closing SBSTA and do not make any recommendations approved, as we know, based on the decision of the Bureau. So the intersessional period between, for example, SBSTTA-24 and Working Group 3 as such doesn't exist, as there is no really conclusion and adoption of all documents. So if you're talking about the period between the closure of SBSTA and COP, again, as we discussed before, that can be a super short period. So, but we may reflect those elements as party statements when we come to particular agenda item. And in terms of item 3, some elements we believe reflected in the report, as well as it was addressed in the document prepared by co-chairs of the contact group. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As you can see, this is a factual report of what happened, and in particular for organizational matters was on the adoption of the agenda, the election of officers, and the organization of work. But let's think about if how to address properly which section. This is a report of decisions we made and how we organize the works along all these 6 weeks. And if there are no more comments on item 2, item 2 of this report is now approved. Now I open to approval on item 3 on post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. I see no request from the floor. I see Canada. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On item 3, I'm assuming you're talking about the whole section. So on part B, on technical and scientific aspects of the goals and targets of the post-2020 biodiversity framework and suggested monitoring framework, paragraphs 35 and 38, we have some observations. On paragraph 35, the second line, we think that a better reflection of our discussion would be to state the understanding was that the co-chairs, with the support of the Secretariat, instead of just the Secretariat. So, so it would actually be the understanding was that the co-chairs, with the support of the Secretariat, and we would strike out together, sorry, I'll repeat. The understanding was that the co-chairs, with the support of the Secretariat, would use the survey results and so on and so forth. It would continue. In addition to that, we note that in the same paragraph 35 at the end, we don't recall there being a discussion about the monitoring framework being a separate document from the Global Biodiversity Framework. And we think that the way it's presented here, it's inferring that. And so our preference would be to strike as part of the revised, when aligning, and replace it with and integrate. So it would read to revise the monitoring framework and integrate it with the first draft of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Would you like me to repeat that before I go into paragraph 38?
I believe I got it. I will say it. So paragraph 35 would read comments provided by parties in the survey were compiled, and then the understanding was that the co-chairs, with the support of the Secretariat, will use the survey results along with the more general views expressed to revise the monitoring framework and integrate it with the first draft of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. That's what you suggest. I'd just like to verify also with Secretariat if this is correct. And this, in particular, the last part, to integrate it with the first draft. I see Secretariat noting. Now, your next comments are on 38. Please proceed.
Comments in the same type of vein, but so similarly, we would, instead of noting that the Executive Secretary would revise the monitoring framework, we would say the co-chairs, with the support of the Secretariat. So we're consistent, with what we have in paragraph 35. We're open it to be the Executive Secretary if that's the preference, if that's the usual thing, but we note in 35 we said the Secretariat. So it would be either that the co-chairs with the support of the Secretariat, and then instead of would revise the monitoring framework, we would say would integrate the monitoring framework. And it would continue, including the headline, component, and complementary indicators. And then instead of as part of the revised, instead of in the first draft of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, it would just be, apologies, there's a lot of drafting. Would integrate the monitoring framework, including the headline, component, and complementary indicators, in the first draft of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework.
So can you read how the paragraph sounds?
It was noted that the co-chairs, with the support of the Secretariat, would integrate the monitoring framework, including the headline, component, and complementary indicators, in the first draft of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and would further update it as necessary to align with the outcomes of a third meeting of the open-ended working group on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework for subsequent consideration at the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Canada. Now I give the floor to Sweden, followed by Norway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our comment is related to paragraph 37. Here it says, following the report of the contact group co-chair, statements were made by representatives and so on. And we call that the statements actually included the identification of gaps in the co-chair's report. And we would like to see that reflected in this paragraph. So we propose a formulation like statements on identified gaps in the report were made by representatives and so on.
Can you repeat it, please? So it will be statement on identify gaps?
On identified gaps in the report.
Were made by the representatives of so on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Norway, followed by Argentina.
To say that, thank you, Chair. It's just to say that Norway has the same observation as Canada regarding para 35 and 38. Thank you.
Excellent. Yes, to make clear participation of co-chairs in collaboration with Secretariat. Argentina tiene la palabra.
Argentina, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. I would like to have clarity as to where Sweden wants to include its comment on the comments made in the plenary on the report. We think we have to consider this in particular when it comes to the survey, which is mentioned in paragraph 35, because in the plenary it was pointed out that the way in which this survey is reflected in the report seemed to lead to two questions, namely it needed more work in terms of indicators. And also we said that the conclusions were inadequate and it was not quite clear where this nuance was going to actually be reflected. We would like it to be reflected somewhere. That's important for us. And then to come on to Canada's suggestion on this question of integrate the monitoring framework into the zero draft. I don't know whether we can support that modification. Our understanding is not that this is not the agreement on how we are going to proceed in the working group. At least at this point in time, we're open to having a discussion on this aspect, but it's not clear to us that Substa has already agreed on this in any form in our discussion. So we would prefer to stick to the text as it stands in the report. Thank you very much for those clarifications, Argentina. So I'd like to ask the Secretariat, what is their interpretation of this second amendment from Canada in light of Argentina's question that they've just flagged? Secretariat, please.
The comment from Argentina makes sense, as it's definitely not for Substa to make decisions about the global biodiversity framework and how it should look like, including integration of different parts into the framework, as it stays with the open-ended working group. So from our perspective, Argentina is right, and procedurally it will be better to keep aligned and leave to the open-ended working group to decide if open-ended working group would like to integrate it or not. So, and I also like, again, to draw attention of all participants that this report is a procedural one and do not really intend coming into specific substantive analysis of different items. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretariat. So I suggest that we maintain the second part of paragraph 35 as it is originally, because then we are going into different interpretations of what is the general understanding. This is a factual report, not to negotiate, not to be negotiated. We're trying to reflect what happened, and it could be different interpretations, but so far my suggestion is not to include the last part and integrate and to keep aligning as suggested by the Secretariat, as this document was prepared also with the rapporteur. I give the floor to EU. I invite you to move on, colleagues. We have many still more elements to finish with our session today. So I give the floor to EU, followed by Denmark. EU, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, it's about paragraph 37. While we understand the comment from Sweden, we also understand the comment from Argentina, and as Sasha said, the aim of this report is not to give all the details. So we do not remember that the statements made were only on the identified gaps. So either you start listing or the topics of the statements, or preferably we leave it as it was. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if my microphone is making too much noise because somebody turned it off regularly. EU, and thank you for this. And I believe following comments, and this is also responding to Argentina questions on paragraph 37, maybe we should leave it open. Following the report of the contact group, statements were made by many representatives and not specifically on identified gaps in the report as was previously suggested. My suggestion is not to include this comment, because then we have to make a list of many things. So I prefer to keep it open, reflecting more closely what happened. I hope this is agreeable. And now I give the floor to Denmark.
Thank you, Chair. That's my intervention is also on paragraph 37. Well, it was initially to support Sweden, because I believe that they were on the gaps, and also to note that Denmark took the floor expressing concerns on the summary of the survey, or the resume. So we would like to be added to the representatives, and if we take the paragraph without the addition by Sweden, we can go with that. But I think that the general impression was that there was some debate on the not all had been fully captured, and the brief summary of the survey. But we'll be flexible on that, on the gaps, even though we think Sweden had a point. Thank you.
Thank you, Denmark. So we include Denmark in the list of parties in paragraph 37. Let's keep the text as originally without making a specification to only two gaps in the report. Okay, this is a procedural thing, and after the report of the contact group, there were statements made by many parties. This is what we want to keep. Thank you. Canada. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know that you want us to move on, and so I'm trying to be as practical as possible. I mean, I take the point made by my distinguished colleague from Argentina, as well as from the Secretariat, regarding paragraphs 35 and 38. But in a similar manner, we don't recall there being any discussion about not integrating it, or about having the monitoring framework necessarily separate from the global biodiversity framework. And the way that these two paragraphs, especially paragraph 35, is written, it infers or supposes, and actually uses the term, the understanding was that, to make it sound like the monitoring framework necessarily has to be separate. And that wasn't the case. And so as a quick way forward, maybe to help you out, to help all of us out, perhaps we could propose ending the paragraph 35 after monitoring framework in the fourth line, and just saying, revise the monitoring framework. And for paragraph 38, sorry, not 37, 38, if we weren't to include integrate and keep a line, we would want to see align the monitoring framework, including the headline and complementary indicators, with the rest of the first draft, and then continue. So it leaves both options open, and it doesn't prejudge that discussion. Thank you.
Okay, Canada. So if I understood, we can cut the last part of paragraph 35 to revise the monitoring framework. Full stop, no more comments. Okay, that helps. And on paragraph 37, we keep original, just adding Denmark in the list of statements. And on 38, we include co-chairs with support secretariat, and then is align the monitoring framework. And can you repeat your suggestion after headline?
Yeah, it would be including the headline component and complementary indicators with the rest of the first draft of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework.
With the rest of the first draft. Okay, colleagues, I hope with these amendments we can approve section 3. Is there any opposition to approve with these amendments? I think that concerns from Argentina were addressed, and EU too, but I still see Argentina and EU asking for the floor. Please help me to approve the report. Argentina tiene la palabra.
Argentina, you have the floor.
Suggestion on paragraph 37, that is okay for us. We can support Canada's suggestion on paragraph 35. However, on paragraph 38, to say with the rest of the first draft seems to imply that the monitoring framework is part of the first draft. So our suggestion would be to, instead of saying the rest of the first draft, in the understanding that we're talking about indicators for goals and targets. That's what we have discussed, to say with the goals and targets of the post-20 Global Biodiversity Framework. And I think that there would be no doubts there that we're talking about that we are not mixing things of what we have to have in the first draft, etc.
So it should say with the goals and targets of the first draft. Is that what you're suggesting? Argentina?
Yes, Chair, that would be correct.
Thank you very much, Argentina. EU, followed by Norway, and I would like to close this section, hopefully.
I fully support you, Chair, but I'm getting confused with this paragraph 38 because I think we are mixing two different things. The monitoring framework includes headline indicator, a component, and complementary indicators, while in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, there is an annex with the headline indicators. So I don't know what Canada wants really to it would be good if Canada could explain, because we don't want. Do we need this at all? That was my question. Do we need to make all these reference? Can't we just simplify the sentence? I will work on it.
Thank you, EU. Yes, we need to be simple, hopefully. Norway, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to the suggestion by my distinguished Argentinian colleague on using goals and targets instead of the Global Biodiversity Framework. But it's our understanding that the Global Biodiversity Framework also encompasses implementation mechanisms, right? So it wouldn't be right to use goals and targets unless it's clear that the implementation mechanism part of the framework would be covered by some other language. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Canada, help us to move on, to reflect what really happened, and then move on. Canada?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, and I'm fully supportive of what Norway just said. That was the point. I mean, I take, and I thank our colleague from Argentina for that suggestion, but similarly to Norway, you know, we think that the framework, the Global Biodiversity Framework, is much more than just goals and targets. And the monitoring framework is more, and to respond to our colleague from the EU, the monitoring framework is much more than headline, component, and complementary indicators. It's a package of many things, and many of us have been saying for a long time now, and we understand that that's just not necessarily a consensus view, but many of us feel that this needs to be an integrated part of the Global Biodiversity Framework. I think we've got it then on paragraph 35. On paragraph 38, sorry, I'm not sure how we simplify it in a way that doesn't prejudge whether or not the framework is annexed or part of or completely separate. Thank you.
I need help from you in how to better reflect the spirit and the expectations when we work on these points. We are sending advice to co-chairs on the different elements as we work. This is part of the report of co-chairs. And when we make reference to the monitoring framework, this is also for them to consider. But we know that later SBSTA will work on the monitoring framework once we know what is the final version of the Global Biodiversity Framework. So, but they have to take it into account, but it's up to co-chairs to decide on the elements. And we need to wait and to continue doing our work to later align. If this is complicating more things, I'm wondering if is there a reason to have the whole paragraph as such, or to find a better way that really reflects expectations and understanding of all parties, and not to get into one or other specific. This is not a negotiation, so I would like to see that all what we produce and is in the report is of support will be taken in consideration by co-chairs. So please help me to move on. We're taking too long on this point. EU, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, I've just one, I like to kiss, to keep it simple. And so I would just propose to just to delete the part which is after framework in the second line and go to the end of the third line. So it would read, it was noted that the co-chair with the support of the Secretariat will align the monitoring framework and would further update it as necessary to align with the outcomes of the open-ended working group 3 and so on. Something like that, just to keep the spirit but not go into the detail of whether or not it's part at this stage of the monitoring framework. Thank you.
Thank you very much, EU. I think that is very helpful. Again, less is more. So I submit for approval paragraph 38 as follows. It was known that the co-chairs, with the support of Secretariat, will align the monitoring framework and will further update it as necessary to align the outcomes of the third meeting of the open-ended working group for subsequent consideration at COP15. Is there any opposition to this phrase, that is, to this paragraph reflecting what happened? This is not a negotiation, please bear in mind. UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I was also trying to simplify this paragraph along the lines proposed by the EU, but I think we could perhaps go further. I'm not sure. There are two parts to this paragraph. The first part refers to what should be done before the third open-ended group, and then the second part refers to what happens after the open-ended working group. I think the first part rather duplicates what's in paragraph 35, and so it could just go on. It was noted that the executive secretary would further update it update the monitoring framework as necessary to align with the outcomes of the third meeting of the open-ended working group. So we would delete the first part between would align the monitoring framework, including headline, etc., because I think that duplicates what's in paragraph 35. And I think the other point to note is that this final phase, following the third open-ended working group, would be the responsibility of the executive secretary rather than the co-chairs with the support of the executive secretary. So it would read, it was noted that the executive secretary would further update the monitoring framework as necessary to align it with the outcomes of the third meeting of the open-ended working group and continue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, UK. I think it's very clear. Thank you for these precisions. Certainly is not responsibility of co-chairs to optimum framework. They are working working on preparing draft one. This is before the meeting of the third meeting of the open-ended working group. And secretary will align this. I hope we can go along with the language proposed by the UK at this stage and to avoid duplications with paragraph 35. Can Secretariat say paragraph 38 as proposed by the UK?
So, Chair, not sure we captured all, but understanding is that it will read, it was noted that the executive secretary would further update the monitoring framework is necessary to align with outcomes of the third meeting of the open-ended working group for subsequent consideration at the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties.
Exactly.
So the changes will be at the beginning, basically simplifying to executive secretary would further update monitoring framework as necessary to align with outcomes of the third meeting.
Yes, I believe this is a good formulation. Factor, we spent a really long time on this point in the report. Canada, I hope we are flexible to reflect these discussions and expectations and to move on. Canada, you have the floor. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think the UK did a wonderful job in simplifying it. There is one point we don't agree with, though, and we don't agree with the point that it is only the responsibility of the executive secretary to update the monitoring framework. And it could be integrated, we understand that not everyone agrees, but if we agree that it's integrated into the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, then it should be done together with everything else, and that's a responsibility of the co-chairs. And so the only tweak we would suggest for it to be acceptable to us is to include, it was noted that the co-chairs with the support of the executive secretary. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. Is that formulation from Canada acceptable to include in paragraph 38? It was noted co-chairs with support of Secretariat will further update the monitoring framework as necessary to align with the outcomes of the third meeting. I see no objections. So I submit for adoption item 3 of the report. I see no more objections. Item 3 is adopted. Now, let's move to item 4 on synthetic biology. I submit for adoption item 4. I see Brazil followed by Argentina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, once again. And Brazil would like to draw attention to paragraph 46, as we're struggling to see the reason why Brazil has been singled out in this paragraph, given the fact that all the delegations under other agenda items have expressed some very particular views on some aspects of other documents, and they have not been singled out in the report. So we're struggling to see the reason why we have been singled out here, especially because we understand that other delegations have expressed the importance of conducting an analysis on the new and emerging issue criteria, and that is the main reason why we have why it was established a Friends of the Chair group to discuss this aspect. So we would suggest deleting paragraph 46 from the report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Brazil. So you suggest to delete this part. Let's delete it. Argentina, ¿tiene la palabra?
Argentina, you have the floor. We have objections on this section, but in fact we need to point out, as we said this morning, that we have to complete this by saying that there were delegations that express problems with connectivity and then had to try and participate by email when dealing with this CRP. We'd like that to be reflected. Thank you very much, Argentina. So I'd ask the Secretariat to include a paragraph to express the fact that there were connectivity problems.
I see no objections. Adopted. Approve. Now I submit for approval item 5 on risk assessment. Germany.
My comment is on
Microphone to Germany. I will hear you.
Can you hear me? So my comment is on paragraph 55 on the mandate of the contact group. We think it should be a little bit more precise in the third line. So issues related to process to develop additional guidance materials on risk assessment of living modified organisms, and then the text containing engineered gene drives.
Can you repeat the research, please?
So it would read, develop additional material on risk assessment of living modified organisms containing engineered gene drives.
Additional guidance. Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank
Brazil.
you.
¿Tiene la palabra?
I have the floor, Brazil.
My question goes along with Germany. I think during the contact group, it would be develop additional voluntary guidance materials. So perhaps we could have this minor amendment. And just to make it clear, and another issue, just to make it clear, regarding section 4, I understood the paragraph 46 was deleted, right? Okay.
That's correct. Thank you. With these two amendments on paragraph 55, I submit for approval section 5. I see no objections. Approve. Now, item 6 on marine and coastal biodiversity. I see no objections. Then, item 6, Colombia.
No es objeción, señor presidente. Solo
It's not an objection, Chair, but in 59, please include the statement made by Colombia because we're not reflected in there. So put in Colombia, please, under paragraph 59. Thank you, Chair. Yes, we will include Colombia in the list of parties that took the floor there. And now I'll give the floor.
Have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. If there are no objections, just on most efficient on fixing our discussion earlier on now MT63.
Denmark, we have problems to hear you. Your sound is not good. Maybe if you turn off your...
Can you hear me now?
It's better.
Is it better?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. Thank you, Chair, and sorry about that. It's just on the now into 63 we would propose, thinking of our discussion earlier today, adding parties raised sentence along the lines of parties raised concerns that marine issues had not been dealt with sufficiently, because there were a number of Portugal one was supported by.
I'm sorry, but I cannot hear you. We cannot hear you well, Denmark. Maybe can we try? I'll give the floor meanwhile to Senegal, and let's try again with Denmark. Senegal, you have the floor.
Is it on?
Can you hear me? Because my video is not working. Thank you. I would just like to reiterate the fact that Senegal should also be indicated in the document as statements were made, and that marine and coastal biodiversity is extremely important to Senegal, and we would like to see that reflected in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senegal. Senegal will be included in the list in paragraph 59. And your comment, if you would like to provide something for the report, we can include it. If you have specific text as a... Then Denmark again.
Chair, can you hear me now?
Yes, now it's much better.
Thank you. I've taken my headset off, so it starts to echo. Just please say something. Anyway, based on our discussion earlier, we would like to propose, earlier today, an extra para along the lines addressing the concerns raised by Portugal and supported by many parties, to include a para at the end that perhaps at the completion of the first session of SBSTTA, parties raised concerns that marine issues had not been dealt with sufficiently because, well, it was raised by Portugal, but I believe they received support from, if I got it right, Denmark, Bulgaria, France, Colombia, Brazil, Sweden, Chile, Peru, Senegal, Australia, and Spain.
Yes. If you provide the text that will be included expressing these concerns, I'm very much worried. We have only 7 minutes to finish our session and still some more elements. But point is well taken. This concern can be included in the report if you provide us text.
I have provided text. Should I put it in the chat, or should I take dictation speed?
Please provide it at the chat, and we need to continue being sure that this your right to express this concern.
Thank you.
Thank you. With this, I'd like to submit for approval item 6. I see no objections, then it's approved. Now we move to item 7 on biodiversity and agriculture. Austria, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and a good afternoon to everyone, a good day to everybody. My comment goes on para 71. It's true that at this SBSTTA meeting, we did consider the CRP on agenda item 7. However, we were not able, due to time constraints, to consider also the annex contained in the CRP, which includes the draft action plan on the International Initiative for Conservation and Sustainable Use of Soil Biodiversity. Therefore, this annex has been put into brackets. We find it very important that this report accurately reflects the status of this annex, and we therefore suggest that at the end of this paragraph, we add the following. However, due to time constraints, could not consider the annex containing the draft action plan 2020 to 2030 for the International Initiative for the Conservation and Sustainable Use of Soil Biodiversity, which therefore has been put into brackets.
So can you repeat your suggestion at the end of paragraph 71?
Correct.
However, due to time constraints?
Yeah, however, due to time constraints, could not consider the annex of the CRP containing the draft action plan 2020 to 2030, blah, 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 which therefore has been put into brackets. And since I have the floor, Chair, and if you allow me, I also would like to align the Austrian delegation with the statement that has been made by Sweden on the importance of the intersessional work. We understand that the CRPs we have been considering and approving at this virtual session of SBSTTA do not include the requests to the Secretariat on intersessional work, and this is due to the deferring of the adoption of L documents to a physical meeting. However, there is on some agenda items still some work to be done by the Secretariat, especially on those requests mandated and requested by COP14 already. And we find it very important, and therefore we also would like to be reassured that these requests are captured in the documentation of the SBSTTA. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Well, with these comments, I submit for approval item 7. I see no objection. Approve. We have very few minutes, colleagues, and we need to close the meeting. Help me, please, to adopt the report. Argentina, you have the floor. Tiene la palabra Argentina.
Para ahorrar tiempo, es simplemente notar.
To save time, just like to note under item 7, 4 and 9, would like that we take note of the connectivity problems experienced. And so that can be taken into account when we consider the other items. So,
item 8 on the program of work IBES. I see no objections. Then is approved. Biodiversity and health will be complete later based on our discussions. And at item 10 on invasive species, alien species. I see no objections. Then item 10 is approved. Now the section on suspension of the meeting, and as I mentioned at the beginning, there's a number of paragraphs that we will approve later. Well, based on what happened today. With this, we approve the partial report of the meeting. I know we have very few minutes left, less than 10 or 10 at the most, to proceed with the following sections. Let me go to my notes, please. And we go at this. Sorry about that. The Secretary, in consultation with the Chair and the Rapporteur, will incorporate today's proceedings and all the changes approved by this plenary. I therefore invite the meeting to approve the first part. It's already approved. Sorry about that. As this is not a formal closing, but rather a suspension of our meeting, we will not hear any closing statements from regions, parties, or observers. However, we do have the pleasure to hear some closing remarks from Ms. Elizabeth Maruma Mrema, the Executive Secretary. Elizabeth, you have the floor.
Can you hear me? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, delegates, ladies and gentlemen. As you have indicated, this is not clearly closing statement, but basically a statement of giving thanks. And therefore, it is my pleasure first to be with you today as we suspend this formal online 24th meeting of the subsidiary body on scientific, technical and technological advisor SBSTTA-24 to the Convention on Biological Diversity. As this is not a formal closing, but rather a suspension of our meeting, my comments actually will just be brief. It has truly been, and to quote you, our SBSTTA chair, our marathonic 6 weeks since I last took the floor to welcome you to our very first formal virtual meeting of SBSTA. When we embarked on this journey, we could only hope that it would have been as smoothly as it has been. Yes, there has been challenges, but with resilience and determination, we have largely overcome many of them. It has been my honor to support you, and along with my team at the Secretariat, as we head towards the final leg to the UN Biodiversity Conference and the adoption of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework when we meet in Kome. We could not have had these sessions without the generous assistance of our host country, the Government of Canada, which generously covered the additional cost incurred for our virtual meetings. Honorable Chair Hezekiel, members of the SBSTA Bureau, I will totally be amiss if I do not sincerely thank you, beginning with Hezekiel, for your able leadership during these trying times of experiencing formal virtual negotiations for the first time in the history of the convention, albeit with no decisions taken. We have all had to learn the new ways of working, including yourself, and in so doing, you have inspired us all to do so in the spirit of openness and cooperation. I would also like to thank our SBSTA Bureau members, many of whom were asked to work all hours of day and night, awkward hours, for their support and flexibility. I ask you to equally extend my grateful thanks to your regions for their openness and trust. We welcome your feedback on further ways we can improve our virtual meetings for the future. To you, dear participants, I would like to acknowledge your hard work, dedication, and sacrifices, especially those in the Asia-Pacific region who have spent many sleepless nights with us. That was not a small commitment, which we cannot take for granted. With more than 1,400 registered participants, representing about 127 parties and one non-party, and more than 200 organizations, the level of active participation and engagement was very much akin to an in-person meeting, in the absence, however, of really interpersonal contacts and communication. In one sense, we have missed the human element, yet in other ways, we have gained it. Thank you for welcoming us into your homes and offices, albeit virtually. Throughout these weeks, we have heard your dogs barking, your roosters crowing. We have caught a glimpse of a baby sleeping in the father's arms, heard the sounds of the cities around you. We have admired your artwork and seen the daylight and dark skies through your windows. We have listened to the sound of your children playing. And as one of my team members even suggested, these joyful sounds should form the soundtrack of all our CBD meetings, as they remind us of the very reason we are gathered together. We have heard many constructive interventions over the past 6 weeks. With the support of the Secretariat, the guidance of the SBSTA Chair and the SBSTA Bureau, this meeting has advanced the further development of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework and other agenda items, all key to our preparations to the Conference of the Parties 15. Finally, I cannot finish without thanking the co-chairs of the different contact groups and facilitators of the Friends of the Chairs groups for their tireless work in ensuring you reach a compromise. To our dear interpreters who helped us to communicate and understand one another, and the technical support staff at Interratio who ensured we could see and hear each other, my heartfelt thanks. Last but not least, I must gratefully recognize those without whom SBSTA would not have taken place, namely my team at the Secretariat, including substantive, technical, logistical, and support staff who have gone above and beyond the call of duty to ensure the success of the meeting. At this point, I sincerely want to thank my colleague, Sasha Alexander, who unfortunately, this is his last SBSTA meeting. Sasha, not just us at the Secretariat, I'm sure all the participants whom you have been engaged with over the years will miss you as you transition into other endeavors. Sincere thanks, Sasha, for leading us as the Secretary of the SBSTA for all the preparations for these meetings to where we have reached. Many thanks, and I'm sure I'm saying the same on behalf of the team with the Secretariat and probably also of the participants. We have achieved many firsts through their dedication and hard work at the Secretariat. It has been very demanding to ensure that all preparations were duly completed and seamlessly ready for your deliberations, as well as to the service each agenda item has had. Thank you, my dear colleagues. You have my heartful gratitude and admiration. To all of you, I look forward to seeing you, hopefully in person, very soon or otherwise. Au revoir, and until we meet again, asanteni sana.
Asante sana. Thank you very much, Ms. Maruma and Brema, for your closing remarks. Elizabeth, Executive Secretary of CBD, delegates, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Before we officially suspend this formal online 24 meeting of SBSTA, I'd like to provide a brief overview of our joint journey during the last 6 weeks. At this point, it was my great pleasure to be with all of you during this first ever online SBSTA negotiations. I see that the Executive Secretary already quoted me, and I can only confirm that all of you deserve the special token of appreciation, a real golden medal for the first CBD virtual marathon. I just think about 9 plenary sessions and 14 sessions of contact groups and Friends of the Chairs during that period, and many of you also been busy with the third meeting of subsidiary body and implementation, as well as other agreements related with biodiversity. And we had great results coming from this online session. We completed the first reading of all agenda items. We have 9 CRPs developed and managed to approve 6 of them. On GBO5, on post-2020, framework on synthetic biology, on risk assessment and management, agricultural biodiversity, and the program work of IPBES after hard negotiations. Yes, we have 3 outstanding CRPs and 1 more to be developed. And yes, we have squad brackets in CRPs approved. Taking into account the extraordinary circumstances we all are due to ongoing pandemic situation, we will finalize the recommendations of the SBSTA at a later date at a face-to-face meeting organized back-to-back with a physical meeting of the working group on post-2020 or the conference of the 15th COP, unless otherwise decided by the Bureau. At the face-to-face part of SBSTA 24, we will consider CRP2, CRP4, and CRP4 on marine and coastal biodiversity, CRP7 on invasive alien species. We will continue our work on item 9, health and biodiversity, through the contact group. And of course, we will consider all L documents. And nonetheless, at this meeting, we made great progress, keeping momentum and preparing for COP15, as well as providing an important advice and contribution to the development on post-2020 global biodiversity framework. I'd like to use this opportunity to recognize and thank both co-chairs of post-2020 for their participation in this meeting being very attentive listeners, absorbing great advice and messages provided by parties and observers they can use in finalizing the first draft of the Global Biodiversity Framework. Dear colleagues, we never had that many participants registered for SBSTA meetings. An executive secretary already mentioned impressive figures. Unlikely to the physical meetings, we almost had no one-person delegations. We all learned a lot from these sessions. We know how to check connections, how to set out our devices for microphones and speakers. We know how to request for the floor and write comments to the chat and still being heard. How to make interventions slowly and still fit into 3 minutes. How to make your written statements public online, and a lot more. Of course, it is all logistical elements, but we learn how to run the complex contact groups online when we are not at the same tiny room and we cannot see each other. We learn how to communicate to the Secretariat when they are not just next to us, but at the same time always present. How friends of the chair can be effective in finding solutions through the virtual setting. How to survive through the difficult parts of the day and still proactively contribute, and how to keep good spirit, enthusiasm, and constructive mode while being exhausted. And I can come on and on. It is also for the Bureau to further work on the lessons learned from these sessions. It was a challenging meeting for many. And I like to specifically mention observers who were patient and actively participating in the meetings, providing their contribution. And I fully appreciate the engagement, despite the chronic lack of time, to address more of their interventions, in particular at the first reading plenaries. The online system also helped us to be more efficient when getting support to the observers' statements by parties. As the SBSTA chair, I keep my commitment to continue my engagement with observers and being open for communication with you. It is unfortunate that we had no more time at this intergovernmental meeting to bring you more of your expertise, while we still benefit from those written statements you were able to upload to the meeting website. Dear Elizabeth, I would like to thank you and your entire team across the Secretariat for your every minute support and care you surrounded participants. Knowing a bit more about the work behind the scenes, I only can express my deep respect to all contribute, and also join you by thanking Sasha for its great contribution for SBSTA. I wish you all the best, Sasha, my friend. My dear colleagues, in the SBSTA Bureau, also working with you was really a privilege. I have the feeling that since SBSTA-23, we had same number of SBSTA Bureau meetings as through the entire history of the convention. Thank you for your help to steer the way for this meeting and for your work within your regions to keep them informed and bring their views, needs, and support. We will continue our journey towards the face-to-face part of SBSTA-24 and successfully complete its meeting. Alison and Wayne, sorry for all those night hours of the Bureau meetings. Dear participants, you made this meeting, and I only thanking you for sharing with us your homes and offices. Your dedication through any time of the day, while keeping good spirit and working hard, made all our progress possible. My special thanks to colleagues who tremendously helped me and all of us by running contact groups and Friends of the Chairs groups to move our work forward. I cannot avoid those patients from our aims to speed up the process and say as much as possible with and interest. We know the challenge, we're grateful for professionalism and understanding. Now, we'll know by name people from Interaction who ensure we could see and hear each other, my sincere thanks also. I look forward face-to-face at the meeting where I can see all ears. Thank you. It is suspect.